You get a chance to determine how you want to spend that extra $1,100 each year. So the characterization is just flat out a misrepresentation to the American people about what is being accomplished with this plan. The focus to take it so that same worker that I talked about earlier at the pen machine works, who's struggling with his family, will be able to determine what he wants to do with that $660 at the end of the year that's going to be in his pocket. Not in the pocket of my friends who are going to tell you how they're going to spend it. Maybe we'll have some shovel-ready projects. Remember how good that did for us? I think the facts speak for themselves. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Larson, you're recognized to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my good friend from Pennsylvania for talking about the need to have the facts. It would have been great to have the facts here. It would have been great if we had one witness, one expert, and instead we're going to go back and forth for arguments. But I would, for the record, like to submit from the Department of Revenue Services in the state of Connecticut the facts about the impact. Even though the bill, and I understand, Mr. Brady, may I ask you a question? Are you going to be submitting an amendment later on?
Excuse me, that's my intention.
And will it correct the bill further?
We will continue to improve this bill.
Will it remove correct the state and local tax SALT agreements?
The gentleman can review the amendment when it's offered.
Well, like I said, we don't have that information, and we haven't been allowed any expert testimony, and you can't understand why we're upset. You can't understand when the Department of Revenue Services in the state of Connecticut, where not 6%, but 41% of the people, 41%, make those deductions. So what you've asked the state of Connecticut to do is what Mr. Zeldin, your colleague, described of New York, and the same thing is happening in Massachusetts and New Jersey and in Maryland and in California and Oregon and Washington State. Coincidentally, blue states. But having said that, what you're doing to them is asking this regional shift of money. You're asking them to pay more. It's double taxation. And you're taxing the success of professionals because they've been successful in what they've done. And you're doing it without a single expert or public hearing. That's what we're mad about. We started out what we thought was on the same page, with everybody saying that, yes, we certainly would like to see lower individual rates and lower corporate tax rates. And yes, we thought that it would be a good idea also that if they were both revenue neutral, as they were in '86, and as Mr. Neal has pointed out time and again, that they'd be distributionally neutral as well. We also felt that it was a great idea to simplify the tax code, but this neither simplifies it, nor is it revenue neutral, nor is it distributionally neutral. And I'd like to submit for the record the gentleman from Connecticut, from Fuss O'Neill, Mr. Peter Gross, who talks about the impact on just an engineering firm and what it does, because there's always winners and losers. And when there's no expert testimony, and when you just jam this down because you want a political win, not a win for the American people, but a win for the Republican conference. Congratulations. You'll probably get that win for your conference, but at the expense of many, many American people. And it's so disturbing to us on this side that not only, and I quote Mr. Brady here, when he was on Morning Joe, talking about when queried about how you will possibly make up this money, this huge debt that you're placing upon the American people, he said, well, actually, you're right about that. You make a good point. We're not going to see this growth. This is just phase one. The next phase is we're going to make these cuts. What are those cuts? Those cuts come in the way of change CPI. And what are they aimed at? They're aimed at Social Security and Medicare. So for all of you who are out there, you understand why there's no expert testimony, because you know what that will do to you. They're out to cut, not entitlements, because Social Security isn't an entitlement. It's the insurance all of you have paid for. So is Medicare. It comes under the code under something we call FICA, the Federal Insurance Contribution Act. Whose contribution? Yours. What are they out to cut? Your benefits. I yield back.
Mr. Renacci, you recognize to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wow, I'm sitting here thinking if the American people are watching this today, they're wondering what's going on here, because you know who the real losers are? The American people. Because we are taking their money and we're using it improperly, and this bill actually starts to fix it and give it back to them. So when you shake your head, yes, you had to let me finish the sentence, because that's the problem. The American people are sitting there saying, I'm working every day, and I don't have enough money to pay my bills, and I end up paying these taxes, and they go to Washington. And by the way, you know who put those books together? Not some lawyer, you guys did. The Ways and Means Committee did. If you were here back when these laws are being passed, I mean, everybody in this committee, as laws are being passed and tax laws are being passed, you built this section of laws, and we're trying to fix this section of laws by bringing it down to a simpler tax system. So don't blame somebody for putting those books together. Blame the committee for putting those books together. Yes, the committee. That's who put all those laws together. But let's talk about what we keep talking. You guys keep talking about stuff, and I really don't get it. I mean, these are itemized deductions. The casualty loss, theft and casualty loss, that's an itemized deduction. And do you realize how that works? Somebody has a loss. If they have insurance, it pays for as much of the loss as they can, and then what's left over, there's an amount, 1% of adjusted gross income, and then it becomes an itemized deduction. So these aren't actual losses that are going away. These are itemized deductions where, Mr. Barthold, you've already said, when we doubled the standard deduction, on average, and I realize there are some districts like Connecticut, you're right, Connecticut has a unique situation, but on average, how many people, when you double the standard deduction, will itemize?
Well, Mr. Renacci, I didn't actually report just doubling the standard deduction. It was the combination of doubled standard deduction and the itemized deductions that are still permitted under H.R. 1, and that was 6%.
6%. So we'll have 6% of the people, and you also said the majority of those people are primarily the wealthier people?
Top half of the income distribution
right.
are itemizers.
So again, this bill is once we do what this bill does, we are affecting people who were not able to itemize before, were not able to get the opportunity, were not able to get this credit, and now they're going to get an opportunity to save taxes. And that includes state and local income taxes, that includes casualty losses, that includes interest on home mortgages, that includes all this stuff. So if we're going to keep talking about this, can we at least make sure that we're talking about it's 6%, except for some unique situations? It's 6% of the American people who are probably the more wealthier Americans. That's really the key here. It is frustrating. And again, people back home have to be looking at this and saying, can I get a break? I'm barely making ends meet. Can I get a little break here? I'm paying too much tax. It's being wasted in Washington. It is clearly being wasted. And how do I get some help? And that's what this bill does. Now, we can keep talking about all the wealthy people that you guys want to talk about who are going to be able to itemize, that's 6%. But in the end, I think what we need to start talking about is that hardworking American taxpayer and making sure that they are getting a little bit more take-home pay so they can make ends meet and save a little bit of money. And I think my friend Mr. Pasquarello said he represents so do I. I represent firefighters. I represent police officers. I represent all those same people. I represent all those same people who will get a tax break and want the tax break. And I think that's important. 94% of these people, 94%, will not be itemizing on the average. And we've got to start thinking about those firefighters, those police officers who now will have an opportunity to bring some more tax money home. I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenauer. You're recognized to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.